What is a movie collection? Is it just a bunch of plastic cases gathering dust? Is it a pointless physical catalog of movies that are readily available on digital platforms? I suppose those descriptions wouldn't be entirely wrong, but if you ask me, a movie collection is what it means to the owner. It's a physical tether to the past. For collectors like myself, browsing your collection isn't just looking at movies you own, it's taking a trip down memory lane. Each case on the shelf is surrounded by larger context, taking you back to who you were and where you were in life. My own collection contains many memories, and while I could go through them all and recount every one, I have selected the movies that have the strongest memories and the best stories. And what better way to start this trip through time than with the very first movie I ever owned? Superman the movie on VHS. I can't remember a time where I didn't own this VHS of Superman. I remember having it at an incredibly young age before I could even write. Superhero movies have always been near and dear to my heart, and this old tape of mine is evidence as to why. I just grew up loving superhero movies, which is why I also still own Sam Raimi's Spider-Man on VHS. As I have mentioned before, this was the first movie I ever remember seeing in theaters. It was not the first movie my parents ever took me to see in theaters, according to them they had taken me before, but this was the first movie I ever remember seeing in theaters because it was such a huge event for me. I remember the theater being absolutely packed with people wearing all sorts of Spider-Man t-shirts and memorabilia. I remember in particular being jealous of this one guy because he was wearing the exact same shirt that Peter Parker wore during the cage match scene. During the movie, we were seated very close to the screen, and I became motion sick from watching it up close. My dad had to take me to the bathroom so I didn't throw up in the floor. To this day, I avoid sitting in the first few rows of the theater for fear of getting sick. As for the VHS itself, I was very happy when I got it as a kid, because after it came out on VHS, I wanted it for a really long time, but my parents wouldn't get it for me. Obviously, my parents took me to see the movie in theaters, but they didn't want me watching it a lot. I didn't understand this as a kid, but as an adult revisiting the movie, I completely understand why. Sam Raimi's tendency for horror really made the action in the movie more violent and gory than many superhero movies. I remember that to try to stave off my desire to own the movie, my mother bought me the movie tie-in book and tried to get me to read it. I never did read the movie tie-in book, even though I actually still have it and have attempted multiple times to read it. I was extremely happy when my parents finally got me this VHS, and it's been a cherished part of my collection ever since. As for the other two films in the Raimi trilogy, I still own Spider-Man 2 and 3 on DVD. Of course, I still have all of these Spider-Man movies on Blu-ray now, but due to sentimentality, I find it hard to part with my originals. After my parents finally relented on me owning the first one, every year there was a new Spider-Man movie, there was no hesitation to buy it for me for Christmas. So of course, I've owned these a long time, and I don't see myself parting with them anytime soon. And even if it weren't for that, I'd keep them anyway because the packaging on them is way better than the atrocious looking cases on the Blu-ray re-releases. While we're still talking about superhero movies, I might as well go ahead and get the last sentimental comic book case out of the way with X-Men First Class. As with the others, I also own this one on Blu-ray, but I keep this DVD because it reminds me of a time when I was a kid where my older sister had a job at Best Buy. Because of the discounts she got, she would always buy me the newest superhero movies on DVD when they came out, which is how I came to own First Class. It's also doubly sentimental for me because this was a movie my older sister really wanted to buy, not just so I could have it, but so she could watch it with me. Since we were kids, the X-Men movie franchise has always been something my sister and I bonded over. We grew up loving the movies and the characters, and we've seen nearly every one of the movies in theaters together. Seeing the X-Men movies in theaters and then buying them on DVD later on became sort of a tradition for us after a while. As a kid, I already had most of the X-Men movies because my parents got them for me, but First Class was special because it was from my sister, and that was something that meant a lot to me. If you're watching this, sis, I love you, and thank you for buying me this DVD in 2011. Similar to my Spider-Man DVDs, I also really love the packaging on this edition. I like the slipcover especially. I love how it's embossed with half of a giant X, with the other half being on the back along with the villains of the movie. It was a really neat display to see in stores as well, because they had some editions that were reversed, and when they were next to each other on store shelves, it looked super cool. Now let's move on and talk about a movie that has nothing to do with superheroes, but for reasons I will get into, is still associated with superheroes in my mind, and that is The Wasp Woman. In order to explain why I own this movie, I first have to tell you about where I got it. When I was a teenager, I discovered a local game exchange store, which is a retail chain that sells used video games like GameStop. But what made the store special for me is that they also sold used DVDs and Blu-rays, and at the time, they sold them for really cheap. I can't tell you how formative that store was to both my movie collection and my social life at the time. In high school and even into college, I would spend any free cash I had there buying used movies. I used to hang out there all the time with my friends. I loved shopping there, I loved hanging out there, and I was even good friends with many of the employees. It was one of my absolute favorite places to be. One time I was there hanging out with a friend browsing the movies when I spotted this crappy looking B movie from the 50s called The Wasp Woman. I decided to make a joke out of it, so I turned to my friend, and as I pulled it off the shelf to show him, I said, "Dude, all these people are going crazy over superheroes like Wonder Woman and Captain Marvel? Pfft, they don't know what they're talking about. The original female superhero? The Wasp Woman." As I finished my sentence, before my friend even had time to chuckle, a scrawny, brown-haired white guy wearing glasses jumped out of an aisle halfway across the store and shouted, "Her name isn't the Wasp Woman, it's the Wasp!" I just stood there, flabbergasted. I held up the DVD to where he could see it, and I pointed to it. He saw what I was actually talking about and said, "Oh," and then shrugged off back to wherever he came. My friend and I laughed our asses off. The rest of the visit, my friend could barely keep himself together. On and off, he was just laughing hysterically at what happened. After that incident, every time me and that friend visited Game Exchange, we would see the Wasp Woman on the shelf and would always laugh to ourselves when we remembered what happened. One day the store was downsizing and they had a box of movies they were going to throw away because no one was buying them. Because we were such good friends with the managers and employees, they let us have a look, and one of the movies that was being thrown away was The Wasp Woman. At that point, the movie had been in the store for such a long time and it was such a good memory for me and my friend that I couldn't just let it be thrown away. So, I bought it. In case you're curious, as for the movie itself, it's really terrible. I love a bad movie when it's funny or entertaining, but this one isn't. It's just really boring to watch. Seriously, do not go out of your way to track this movie down. You won't get any enjoyment from it. It's not that kind of bad movie. I bought a lot of movies from Game Exchange, so unsurprisingly, I do have more memories from that store. Game Exchange is where I bought my James Bond set. I remember trading in all the James Bond movies I had at the time, and I was able to get this set for about $44, which was a great deal. I spent the rest of that summer watching every James Bond movie that I hadn't seen before. Game Exchange is also where I got this DVD of Donnie Darko. It would be a Blu-ray, but, well, there's a story behind that. The day I bought it, I was with a friend, and we both decided on a whim that we wanted to see Donnie Darko because we'd never seen it before, so we bought the only Blu-ray copy of the movie that was in the store. Now, when you buy a Blu-ray from Game Exchange, they have to look through a huge drawer behind the counter to get the disc. They didn't leave them in the cases because since they were used movies, they weren't sealed in plastic, so anyone could open it up and steal it. So we bought the movie, they put the disc in the case, we went out to the car, and before I pulled out of the parking lot, I just decided to look in the case at the disc. And when I opened it up, I saw that the wrong movie had been put in the case. Instead of the disc being for Donnie Darko, it was for Donnie Brasco. So me and my friend went back into the store, got the right disc from the cashier, went back to the car with it, got home, popped it in the Blu-ray player, and it didn't work. This is the only Blu-ray I've ever bought that acted this way, but it literally read as a blank disc. At first, I just thought it was my bedroom Blu-ray player being weird, so I stuck it in the living room Blu-ray player, and then I stuck it in my PS4, but every single time, it still read as a blank disc. So me and my friend had to go back to the store again and explain what happened. They gave us a refund, and because that was the only Blu-ray they had of the movie, we ended up settling for the DVD. And that is why I own Donnie Darko on DVD and not Blu-ray. You tend to remember how you got a movie if you went through a lot to get it, and sometimes that's because the movie is just hard to find. While it didn't happen often, sometimes I would go into Game Exchange and find rare gems that I was not expecting. Case in point, my copy of Primer. Primer was a movie that I had searched and searched for online but could not find. As of the writing of this video, it's never been released on Blu-ray in the United States, and the only DVD copy has been out of print for a long time. The only copies that are available online are scarce and expensive. So for probably about 4 or 5 years, I searched and searched for a used copy of this movie. When I first discovered my local game exchange, it was one of the movies I would always look for, but they never had it. After years of it never showing up in the store, I looked for it out of habit, but I never expected to actually find it. Primer is a low-budget indie sci-fi movie from the early 2000s, so it's not like a lot of people owned it. And living in the rural South, I didn't expect anyone in my area to turn it into the store. But one day, as I was scanning the movies, I saw it. At the end of the rack, there was one single DVD copy of Primer. I have never grabbed a movie off a shelf so fast. I picked it up and flipped it to the cover and the price sticker said $2.95. $3. My skin was already crawling with excitement, but when I saw that, I fucking screamed. I shouted, "Holy shit, holy shit, holy shit." My friend who I was with got concerned and ran over to see what was wrong. Unfortunately, he didn't share in my excitement because he had no idea what Primer was. But that didn't matter. I was still in disbelief and in a pure state of awe. That is the most excited I've ever been to find a movie in a store. And even if this does eventually get a Blu-ray re-release, I'll probably hang on to this DVD because of the absolute satisfaction I felt when I found it after years of searching. Probably the only other movie that even comes close to that kind of excitement for me when I bought it was when I bought my DVD of Perfect Blue. Perfect Blue is my favorite movie of all time, and its director, Satoshi Kon, is my favorite director of all time. Despite how much I love the guy's work though, for a long time the only movie I owned from him was Paprika, and that's because all of his other movies were out of print. They were pretty hard to get a hold of and very expensive. Perfect Blue was at the cheapest, $80 to buy on Amazon, and looking on eBay didn't get you much better results. I have actually never found this in a store, and to this day I have never found this version of the DVD in a store before. But my search for this movie wasn't limited to searching used movie stores. I would also regularly search online for it. Every so often when I would try to find a used copy of it, it was always really expensive. People were selling it anywhere between $40 to $100, which is way more than anyone should pay for the quality you get from an early 2000s DVD. But one day, by sheer luck, I caught someone selling a copy of it on eBay for $12. I immediately ordered it, and honestly, I was half expecting a bootleg considering how cheap it was by comparison to everyone else. But it wasn't. It was a legitimate copy. I don't know if the person selling it just didn't know what it was worth or was just being super generous, but either way, I got it. And while it wasn't as satisfying as finding it in person, I was still very happy to finally own Perfect Blue. Since I got the DVD, all of Satoshi Kon's movies have been re-released on Blu-ray, and G-Kids did an amazing job with the HD restoration of Perfect Blue. But I still hang on to the old DVD copy because of how long I searched for it. Even with the movie being re-released, this particular version of the DVD is still rare. Even if it's not as expensive or as sought after as it once was, it is still a hard to come by collector's item. And especially since it's my favorite movie, I won't be getting rid of it anytime soon. My copy of 12 Angry Men is not rare by any means, but I was extremely happy to find it, and it is really special to me. This was my first Criterion Blu-ray, and I got it before I even knew what the Criterion Collection was. At the time, all I knew is that if the movie had the little C logo in the corner, it was going to be way more expensive than I was willing to pay as a high schooler. Which brings us to why this Blu-ray is so special to me. I loved 12 Angry Men and I wanted to own it really badly, but the only Blu-ray of it available was the Criterion version, and that was around $30 to $35 on Amazon, and there was no way I was paying that at the time. I could have settled for a DVD, but even those were around $15, and I didn't want to pay that much for a DVD. So my struggle was hunting for this movie wherever I entered a store that sold used movies. I looked for a good deal on this movie for years and never found it. Then one day I was in Game Exchange and I found this Criterion Blu-ray, the same one that was on Amazon for $30, and it was on the shelf with the price sticker of $4.95. I was elated with joy. It's funny because the only reason I got it for that price was because whoever created the label for it made a mistake and printed a used DVD price sticker for it. $4.95 was the standard price for used DVDs. Blu-rays were about $2 or $3 more expensive. Thankfully, even though they recognized it as a labeling mistake, they still honored the price without me even having to ask. So that was a very good day for me. Another classic drama movie that I have a special attachment to is my 70th anniversary Blu-ray of Citizen Kane. I got this as a high school graduation present from my at-the-time girlfriend. As you can imagine, I was incredibly thankful because this is a very nice collector's edition, and I can almost guarantee you it was a lot cooler of a present than whatever it was I gave to her. Though that relationship didn't last past high school, I still fondly look back on how I got this Blu-ray because it was by far the best graduation gift I received that wasn't cash money or a check. But sometimes the best gifts are the ones you get yourself. And one holiday season while I was in college, I decided to get myself a very expensive gift. Probably the most money I ever spent buying something on Blu-ray was when I bought the complete series of Kill la Kill. I waited to buy this until it was on sale for Black Friday, and even then it was not cheap. If you're not familiar, Kill la Kill is licensed and distributed by Aniplex of America, and they are notoriously and outrageously expensive. There's a reason I hardly own any anime from them, and it's because they charge an arm and a leg for pretty much no reason. It's not like there's anything about their releases that warrants the price, they're just greedy bastards. I have heard that they do this so they don't have to nix on picture quality to save money, but even then, I've seen anime that looks just as good on discs that cost a fraction of the price, so I don't see how that's an excuse. As I said before, I bought all of the volumes online on a Black Friday sale, and it was still really expensive. I can't remember exactly how much it was, but I know it was at least $150 altogether, which is just a stupid amount of money to pay for a 25 episode show. But I didn't care at the time. I loved Kill la Kill. It was one of my favorite anime, it still is, and I really wanted to own it. My one regret buying it is that I only bought one limited edition set. During the sale, the limited editions were about $10 to $15 more expensive than the regular Blu-rays. But looking back on it, if I was going to pay that much for a show, I should have gotten the most bang for my buck and got a second limited edition at least. But hey, it is what it is. I'm happy to own the show, and the one limited edition I did buy is very cool and came with content that more than justified the price difference from the already expensive regular edition. But you know what's better than paying a lot for something? Paying nothing at all. The movies I'm showing on screen now are probably a random assortment, and that's because I got them all at the same time for free. In fact, I got so many movies for free that I probably won't be showing them all in this video, but I got these when the manager at Game Exchange I was friends with was leaving the store. During the last 2 weeks of his employment, he was tasked with cleaning out a warehouse full of old boxes full of movies that hadn't been bought. And instead of throwing them all away immediately, he let me and some of my friends go through some of the boxes and pretty much take what we wanted. I got a lot of movies. All of them were DVDs, but who cares? It was free. I found a lot of gems in those boxes. Some of them were genuinely good movies that I wanted, and some that I could tell just by looking at them would be exceptionally and hopefully hilariously bad movies that I wanted to save for a rainy day. But this to me was more than just a day I got a bunch of free movies. It also signaled the end of an era. All of those memories that I had of Game Exchange were made when this manager was running the store. I was friends with all the other employees who came and went, but it was the manager who really made me feel like the store was special. Over the years, we had a lot of conversations about movies, and he did a lot of nice things for me as a regular customer. At the time he left, I was already going to the store less and less because the Game Exchange Corporation kept changing their policies regarding trade-ins and pricing, making it worse for the customer and really just making it less fun to shop there. With a new manager taking over, it was basically going to be a whole different store from the one I knew when I was in high school and college. I said my goodbyes to that manager as he went off to do bigger and better things with his life, but I'll always remember and be thankful for the environment that he cultivated in that store and all the memories he helped make because of it. And, like so many other things, the memory of him and the store will forever be preserved in my collection.